And I said, what's this pit bull doing here? You said you had no pets. And she's like, it's not a pet. It's an emotional support dog. It's a service animal. You can't ask about it. You can't tell me to get rid of it. You can't do anything, basically. Sure enough, she's right. Then a few months go by, and she brings in another pit bull.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 186. My guest today is Frank Maratta, a listener and fan of the show who contacted us several weeks ago with some great questions. Frank is also an experienced investor and landlord with 12 units that he rehabbed and manages. So I thought it would be an interesting opportunity to invite Frank to the show, learn more about him and his investments, and then answer his questions with the help of Justin Workman. Now, you all know Justin as another friend of the show who's been on many episodes, and Justin is in the studio with me today to help share his expertise in answering Frank's questions. So, first of all, Justin, thank you for being here with me.
Yeah, glad to be back again, Brian. Thanks again.
And Frank, thanks for being on the show. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So why don't we just start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm 32 years old. I'm from Connecticut. I actually just got into podcasts maybe a month ago, and I found yours and I loved it, and I just kept listening. I probably listened to 95% of them. I think the show's great, and to a little bit about myself is I started investing in real estate about 2 years ago, and I kind of just dove right in. I can't remember the point in my life what I said, real estate is, this is what I want to do. But I just remember being on the MLS, and I just remember running numbers, and, I just kind of said to myself, hey, this works. If I can make, $10,000, $12,000 a year off a $30,000, $35,000 investment, this makes sense.
So let me interrupt and ask you, why were you on the MLS? I mean, what made you think, did you have any real estate background or any ownership of property type background that made you even look at the MLS?
No, nothing at all. I have a very bad memory, Brian, but the only thing I could really think of is I had a good friend of mine who was a real estate agent at the time. So maybe the thought came from him. That's the only thing I could really think of why I was actually on the MLS. But I do have a W-2 job. So, real estate did make sense because I could keep my W-2 job, and I could have that passive income coming in monthly while still maintaining my W-2 job. And also I'd be able to, I saw it as a way to, grow a business without, taking a lot of risk with, a huge upfront cost and capital, and, hiring a bunch of employees and quitting my full-time job. This was something I could do on the side. And it just, it made sense.
So take us through that first deal. I mean, that's interesting from just all of a sudden being on the MLS and looking at property prices, saying, hey, I could buy these and rent them and make some money. How did you take that aha moment and turn it into action?
So then I just, I started looking at properties. I'm the type of person where, I like to move fast. I didn't even read any books. I didn't pay for any seminars. I just kind of ran the numbers and kind of tested myself to see if it was, it would work. And I looked at maybe 10 to 15 houses. I think it's probably maybe three or 4 months of searching before I purchased my first one.
So tell us the type of house, the type of neighborhood, and the price range that you were looking at.
Back then, and prices have really skyrocketed since then. But back then, it was like there were still foreclosures in my area, so I was seeing foreclosures under 100,000. There was a three-family I was looking at that was, I believe it was like 80, 85, needed a full rehab. I almost bought that one, but then I saw a duplex in a little bit better area, and it was listed for, I want to say it was like 125. It was fully rehabbed, 2 bedrooms each floor, had a 3-car garage in back, and the numbers made a little more sense on that, especially because I have no rehab experience and no real construction experience. So I kind of started with that just to get going. And I was, really conservative in my numbers because I didn't want to, I didn't want to plan for higher rents and then end up, getting this, not as much cash flow as I had expected.
So it seems like you put a lot of emphasis on running your numbers and being conservative. How did you even know what numbers to run in the first place, especially if you hadn't done any training, read any books, or taken any seminars?
I guess I just kind of used my common sense. I knew I had taxes. I knew I had insurance. I downloaded a quick mortgage calculator from like Quicken Loans or something, and that gave me my monthly payment. So I emphasize like a cash-on-cash return strategy. So if I take my mortgage payment each month and I subtract that from my rents, and the mortgage payment includes taxes and insurance escrowed in with my interest and principal, I'll take that, and the annual return per year divided by my initial cash investment, I try to strive for around 30%. And wow. Then once you add everything back in, water, maintenance, and again, my properties are pretty well kept, so my maintenance expenses are very low. And that's one of the good things about the infinite return strategy that I want to talk about, because there's very little capital expenditures and maintenance after you rehab these houses. But water, once you add the water, like snow plowing and little bits and pieces, and maybe you end up with like a 20-25% return. But I find that 30% is where I like to be.
And that's a 30% return based off of your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance expense. And then you're taking the other expenses out after you calculate that 30% return.
Right. So the 30% would just be my cash flow from my mortgage payment, which is, insurance and taxes are escrowed in it.
Yeah, just be very careful with that, because like you say, when you're analyzing properties, some properties have water included in tenants' rents. Some properties you will mow the grass at, you will plow the snow, others you won't. So really, when you're doing your analysis on these things, I would work hard at itemizing all of them in the future when you're doing this.
Oh, well, I definitely take that into consideration, Justin. I know I'm going to be paying water. I know I'm going to be mowing the grass. If the utilities are shared, then I take that into consideration.
Yep.
But pretty much all the properties I look at are, I'm paying for water, I'm paying for snow plowing and the lawn mowing, and then I'm not paying for utilities.
But it sounds like this is your rule of thumb, though. It's just like some people have
it's just a quick rule of thumb.
You have a rule of thumb that with principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, you want to see a 30% cash-on-cash return, just in that simple calculation.
Right, and that's kind of where I started, and I perfected that a little bit over the couple of years I've been doing this, obviously. But just if I was going through multiple deals back when I was looking on the MLS and I first started, and there was multiple things to sort through, so that was just a quick way of analyzing the deal.
Oh yeah, I completely get that. We all do it in our own ways of just the quick down and dirty. I gotta decide in the next 30 seconds if I'm gonna pay any more attention to this property. So
exactly,
I completely get that. Yeah, I just think it's a big thing. A lot of new people miss is they will just take their mortgage payment, deduct it out of their rent, and they think that's their end of the day cash flow. And I guess that's always the point I'm trying to hammer home with everybody is there's more to it than just mortgage, principal, taxes, and insurance. You've really got to factor in your vacancy, if you're using a property manager, CapEx, maintenance, all those things. And like you say, with newer properties and newly rehabbed properties, you don't have a ton of upfront maintenance cost, but year 10, 11, 12, you're going to start to see some of that again where, okay, it's time to redo a kitchen, or it's time to redo a bath, or the furnace is gone again. It's just that type of thing that today you don't have any cost, but in the future you may have to account for that. So that's the only point I'm trying to hammer home is I see a lot of new people that are just barely breaking even or making $100 a month on a door, and they don't have any of that cost in there because they're paying such a premium for some of these properties today.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com.
Maybe I've been lucky because I've come pretty close to the returns I was expecting on some of these properties, but I totally see your point. And if the building I'm buying isn't, needs some work, then I really, get down with the calculations and go a little bit further into it. But for the most part, all the properties I have purchased have either been fully rehabbed, top to bottom, or by someone else or by me.
So tell us more about this 2-unit that you bought. You picked it up for, what'd you say, $80,000?
No, that was the 3-family I was looking at,
okay.
And then I'd seen the 2-family, and it had made a little more sense. And I actually got I know you like horror stories, so my first tenant,
sure.
My first tenant ever was definitely a good horror story if you want to hear that later. But yeah.
Well, tell us now, since we're talking about it. What kind of horror story? So this is your first tenant ever. You buy this 2-unit, and
Single family.
It's a single family.
Yeah.
No, 2-family.
It's a 2-family.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 2-family. Yeah, pay attention. So you buy this 2-family, and your first tenant you put in, because this is why people stay out of real estate investing in the first place. They're afraid of tenants. Tell us about your horror story right from the start.
So one thing I don't do is I don't screen my tenants. So I pay a professional to do the leasing and take the calls and show the property. And I had used him for the rest of my properties, and he did decent. But this first one, it didn't work out well. I had a no pet policy on this 2-family, and she fills out the application, she moves in, and she says no pets or whatever, and then I had to go to the apartment for one reason or another, maybe to meet her or maybe to fix something. But then there's a pit bull sitting there. And I said, what's this pit bull doing here? You said you had no pets. And she's like, it's not a pet. It's an emotional support dog. It's a service animal. You can't ask about it. You can't tell me to get rid of it. You can't do anything, basically. So, I knew nothing. So I'm like, okay, well, let me look into this a little bit. I'll get back to you. And sure enough, she's right. And I can't do anything. She hands me a letter from her doctor or whatever it was. And, she was Section 8. So at least, I didn't have to worry about the rent. She was 100% paid by Section 8. So the rent's always there. So that was the good part about it. Then a few months go by, and she brings in another pit bull. I'm like, look, I know you don't need 2 service animals. animals. And she's like, oh, it's my friend's dog and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you got to get rid of it. And she's like, oh, they're going to put it down because it's aggressive. I mean, I'm fixing the bathtub and this thing's rattling the cage and the dog food's everywhere, just barking. And I'm like, man, like this dog is bad news. And sure enough, she, found a friend to take it or whatever she did with it, but she got rid of it. And then I walk in, I don't know, maybe a couple months after that, and she had a sandbox. It was like 5 by like 10 feet big with a giant turtle in it. And I'm like, it's like Animal Kingdom over here. Like, what's going on? And she's like, it's just a turtle. And at that point, I'm just like, whatever, it's a turtle. Just let it be for now. I mean, I could tell this isn't working out with her anyway, because I had heard, my downstairs tenant is very good. And she's just, constantly complaining about her, about the noise. The cops have been there. The neighbors have been calling. The downstairs tenant tells me, she's throwing things in the middle of the night. She's breaking stuff. She wakes her up every night. And I'm like, I have a talk with her. I say, you can't. I try not to involve the downstairs tenant because, as you know, it's tough for people to live together as it is. So I just say, look, I heard complaints from the neighboring houses that this is going on. So, 2 weeks goes by. I don't hear any complaints from the downstairs tenant. I think all is good. And then I get a phone call from the downstairs tenant, and she's hysterically crying. And she's like, Frank, I locked myself in the basement. She's crazy. The dog it bit her on the leg, and there's just blood everywhere. So, I had to evict her, and she left, and the downstairs tenant, tried to sue me, but my insurance wouldn't cover it. It was really on the owner of the dog. So, I was lucky enough to, she got out pretty quickly. I don't think she wanted to be there because of the first floor tenant trying to sue her. So she moved, and then and that apartment's like cursed. Then I said to myself, well, I paid a real estate agent to lease this. He didn't do a very good job. So let me try to lease it myself. And then I just wanted to fill the apartment. And, when someone shows up and, they're ready to move in, they seem good. I let the next girl have the place. And sure enough, she stopped paying within like 3 months, and I had to evict her. So that apartment's pretty cursed.
If you are thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition 5 years ago, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional healthcare insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbAssociatesLLC.com. Do you have someone in there who's paying right now?
No, now I just had my guys paint the place, and it's up on the Zillow or wherever he's got it to try to get somebody in there. But tenants are, a good tenant is definitely important in my book. I would rather have someone, pay a little bit less rent and have a better tenant than somebody who pays top dollar and it's just a nuisance.
Yeah, absolutely. So given that, you ended up buying more rental property. So obviously that didn't scare you off.
No, I figured, hey, I got to make this work. It's part of the, this is part of the gig. So the next one I bought was, and this was when the foreclosures were still around, but there was a big 2-family, 5 houses up on that same street. And I said to myself, hey, this house is probably worth, just 5 to 10,000 more just to me, because it's right next to my other property. It's in the same area, so it's worth checking out. So I go over there, and I mean, the thing just needs a full rehab. The owner before me, there's a giant tree right in the front, right where you see it from the street. And the owner before me actually tried to vinyl side the house, but he only vinyl sided the house in the part where you would see from the road. So behind the tree, everything was old asbestos siding. So it looked like the house was vinyl sided, but it wasn't. So yeah, this was a full gut rehab. And, I didn't, again, at this point, I barely knew how to change a doorknob, but I just wanted to make it work. And, I guess I took a chance, and man, I learned a lot. When you are spending your own money, you learn quick. So, if you want me to talk a little bit about that house, I can do that too.
Yeah, well, you had to rehab it. Did you bring in a team to do it? How did you oversee all that rehab?
No, so I didn't hire a general contractor. I did what I could myself, but similar to how Justin does his rehabs. He's the GC. He hires his subs. He hires his laborers that work by the hour. I mean, I was even going to Craigslist at one point to find guys that work by the hour, and it was tough because I have my full-time job. So I would escape for like an hour during the day, drive over there, and always check on people to see what they're doing and see if they're doing it right. Which, I mean, I didn't know what right was at that point, but trying to make it work. But it was a big project. It was, I remember one of my friends who's older. He's a GC, and he walked in one day, and the whole place is just gutted to the studs. And he looks around and he looks at me. He's like, "Man, kid, you got balls." I'm like, "Oh boy, maybe what did I get myself into?"
Well, how'd that one turn out?
Actually turned out really well. So it was, I found like a team of like 4 or 5 Brazilians, and they did great. They did great on the outside. I used them for the siding, did all the windows, resided the house, moved the kitchens. Well, actually, let me back up here, because one of the things I saw in this house when I was about to buy it was that it was huge. It was like 3,400 square feet, and it was a 2-family. And the assessor's card had it listed as a 2-bedroom, 1 bath per floor. And I immediately walked in, and I knew I could get at least 3 beds on each floor. Because, the big thing, I work with a lot of Section 8, and Section 8 is huge on the number of bedrooms. The more bedrooms, the more you get in rent. So I was able to move the kitchens, take out a bunch of windows, add a bunch of windows, and I ended up with 4 beds and 2 baths on each floor. And that ended up renting, when it all was done, the bottom floor rents for $1,600, the top floor rents for $1,800. And I bought it for $80. I put $120 into it, but I got a check from insurance because somebody broke in and stole all the copper, which actually was great for me because I was planning on replacing the plumbing. I was planning on replacing the heating anyway. So they took all the copper, and that really, I figured I probably made about $15,000 in mistakes on that property. So that probably cut my cost to where it should be now if I were to do that same project, which was 120 minus the 15, 105. So I'm into the house for 185. And then I get my cash out refi. It appraises at 253. I get 70% loan of value, 20-year mortgage. All my properties I have right now are 20-year mortgages. So 70% of 253 is 177. So I'm really only into that house for $8,000, and the cash flows, with including water, including everything, is probably about $1,400 a month. So I mean, I made my money back in less than 6 months.
Well, very nice. Hey, just out of curiosity, just because I think it's always fun and it's good for other people to hear, when you first walked through it and kind of put together a rehab budget, do you have any idea what that original number was on your budget?
Oh yeah,
My
you guys are
wild
gonna
ass
laugh.
guess of 50 grand to put this thing
Yep,
together.
50, 60 grand.
Yeah. No, because I think it's
I knew I was going to make mistakes, so I made sure I had enough cash in reserves to cover that. And sure enough, I'm 200% or 100% over budget.
Yeah, but I think it's a good example because I think everybody walks into their first big rehab project and so drastically underestimates what it really takes. It's just a good time to highlight that, of okay, yeah, you made a ton of mistakes, but you learned so much going forward. It's just when you do your first one, have enough in reserve to cover your butt and get out of the thing.
Exactly. I couldn't emphasize that more to new investors. It's definitely, you're always going to go over budget. Even with this second rehab I'm doing, I'm much better, but I'm still about 10, 15,000 over budget.
Which on what'd you say it was going to be $100,000 rehab, something like that on this second one?
The second one is I think I estimated it at 65, and I'm into it. I'm going to be into it once. I got like a month left. I just ran the numbers yesterday. I'm going to be into it for 75, but I'm thinking about doing the main roof. There's a bunch of little tin roofs around this building. There's like 2 bump outs. There's a couple patio roofs and like an overhang where you walk in that are tin. So I knew I had to do that, but turns out that the main roof, and I didn't even know this until maybe two or 3 months after being into the project. And I don't beat myself up over this as something I missed because this was just, I consider this more of an unexpected expense. But the main roof is actually tin as well because it's an old house. So it has a tin roof, and then they just shingled right over it, 2 or 3 layers of shingles. So I mean that's no good, right? It should be done right. Yeah,
you got to go through and yank everything off to redo it at the time. But
yeah.
No, I think it's good because I teach a rehab class for the RPOA, and I tell everybody on their first couple properties, just figure out your budget. And then factor in 20 to 25% of overrun because you're going to run into problems. You're going to have some issues. There's going to be unforeseens, but just kind of normally factor that in. And you're in that ballpark. And as you continue to grow and do more, you'll get closer to that target budget. It's just the experience has got to kick in. And the only way you get it is by doing it. So you're doing good. You're a lot closer on this one than the last.
Oh, yeah, much closer. And, the roof is probably going to cost me. I'm thinking I got a quote from my guys from labor. It's like $5,500, which isn't bad to rip off all this material. And then I'm probably going to, for the plywood, the ice and water, the shingles, probably looking at another 5 or 6 grand in that. So figure 11 grand for the roof. My budget was 65. I'm going to be into it for 75 and then add another 10, 11 grand. That's 85, but prices have only risen since then. So I'm pretty hopeful that this property should appraise at 265, which would be into the property for no money if this all works out.
Wow. Let's talk about this roof because that was one of the questions that you had asked, and that's why I wanted Justin here. Let's talk about that a little bit more, and why don't you tell us the question you had, Frank?
So I actually got into a disagreement with my real estate agent over this because I was, he's an investor as well. He owns a few properties, and I was telling him I was doing the roof, and I said, it makes sense to do the roof now because it's only going to appraise for more. And his argument was basically a roof does not add value to the house. And I kind of said, I don't see how you can say that. And he said, a roof is not an upgrade. Siding, his argument is basically, look, siding looks nicer, windows look nicer. A roof, it doesn't add value to a home. And I said, well, why do you replace siding? You replace siding because, the old asbestos is falling off underneath it, or the wood, clapboards, rotting, and then the old windows are peeling and they don't function right. You replace something that needs to be replaced, and it's, maybe a roof doesn't, catch the eye as much as siding and windows do, but it's a capital expenditure that needs to be done, and I think an appraiser would account for that when determining value. And he said no. The only time you would see a roof maybe appraised from, or not even appraised for more, but he said, if you got two houses, and they're the same price, two identical houses, and one has a newer roof, the customer is going to choose the one with the newer roof. And I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that, because I think once I do the main roof, I can't see why the appraiser would not take that into consideration when determining the value of the house.
I unfortunately completely agree with your real estate agent.
Really?
Yeah. The appraiser is going to compare more square footage and interior features. The roof, although it looks nice and it's something you want to have done, is not going to add value from the appraisal's point of view. Where you get in trouble with roofs when it comes to appraisals is if your roof, they determine your roof is at the end of its life expectancy, like it's showing signs of leaking somewhere or there's shingles missing. That's when the appraiser can screw up an okay roof, because they can determine that the roof shot, and then if you're selling, especially, that the buyer's got to have the roof replaced before the bank will finance it. But when your situation where you're just doing a cash out refi, the appraisal on the roof is not going to matter one way or another. The appraiser's not even going to look at the thing. He's going to pass right over it. So
he won't even look at the roof and notice that it's got 2 or 3 years left with the shingle wear and take points off for that?
Nope. As long as it's still functioning, they don't care.
Wow.
Same thing when you're doing a flip house. The roof adds more feel-good value than it does actual cash in your pocket value. When you're going to sell that house and it has a new roof, the new buyer may feel good about that new roof, but it really does not change the selling price hardly at all. Not anywhere near the cost.
What if you're changing the shingles over from the 3-tab to architectural shingles and it does look nicer? No?
I know. It's just a feel-good item. As long as the roof is good and functioning, and like with FHA, as long as it has more than 7 years of life remaining, determined by the appraiser, you're good to go. It does not change the value. If you're in that 7 year or less and you're trying to sell, it may become an issue, depending on the appraiser. But there's ways to get around that too. But for the most part, the appraiser is never going to look at the roof unless the thing is absolutely hideous, has holes in it, you have water spots on the ceiling. That's the only time I've ever had an issue or heard of issues with appraisers and roofs.
How much life is left in the roof?
I would say 3 years, but there are some shingles that are popping up. And actually, when I got my builder's risk policy for insurance, the inspector came back with, it's a builder's risk policy, so they wouldn't be too concerned. But they did mention some of the shingles that are popping up and missing. So, I don't know. I guess it's not pleasant to the eye. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you got to remember, you look at a property, and I look at a property differently than a tenant will. Is a tenant going to see that roof and say, I'm never going to live there because that roof's hideous? Yeah. 90% of the people that drive by will never see the roof. It's kind of like an old hot water heater versus a new hot water heater. Is your tenant really going to care?
True.
So as an investor, we're not trying to be cheap, but we try to get as much lifespan out of things as we can. Because a penny saved is a penny earned in my mind. So if I can hold off and get 5 years out of that roof by putting $500 into patching it and, getting the thing to live for a little bit longer, am I money ahead?
So if you were me, you would not do the roof right now then?
I wouldn't. If it's leaking, if you have some major issues, and it's all over, sure. But if you can get the thing patched together and you're down the road for another 5 years, that's the route I would go at this stage.
Actually, I got a question for you, Justin, because I have done a couple of roofs, but never, they're just little roofs, patio roofs. I have a flat section on this one it was like an 18 by 30 flat, and we did rubber, and that really, it was covered with a tarp. It was just terrible. But I've never done a main roof, and when you guys do the roofs, do you typically see other things get messed up when they do the roof? For instance, gutters, do they come off? Maybe soffit material, the aluminum that gets wrapped. I mean, do you see that happen when you're replacing roofs? Because if I'm kind of putting everything together on the outside now, new gutters, I got to rewrap some of the fascias. The only thing I would think the benefit would be to do it now would be have it done once, and then if the roof comes off, 5 years down the road, maybe, everything I patched up is kind of going to get in the way of the roofers and damaged.
The only thing you got to worry about is sometimes how the gutter's attached, if they're attached over the top versus screwed through. You do run into that a little bit, but same thing, your roofing contractors are so used to the process that if they do ding something or break something, they're going to fix it. As long as you're hiring a quality guy, he's going to take care of it when it's time to do the roof. They're used to propping up boards and covering windows and dropping tarps and moving gutters. It's their standard normal operating procedure day in, day out. So I'd never worry about that. Later on we'll side a house, and then 3-4 years later we may do the roof on that house. It's not a big deal in my mind. The guys that do it are professionals. They know what they're doing. They're going to take care of this stuff. And if they don't take care of this stuff, you have all the power in your hands. You have their paycheck. If there's something that they screwed up or you're not happy with, you can get them to fix it. You can negotiate that part out. It'll come back to you. You have the power. You have the cash. You're paying for the service. You're going to get what you expect.
True. Yeah, I should definitely tell them up front. I'm concerned with things like that.
Yeah, and just tell them that up front of, hey, we just did the siding 3 years ago. I want to make sure we don't screw anything up. I like the way the fascia and soffit and stuff looks now. I want the gutters reattached. They'll factor all those items into their bid when they give it to you. You may pay a little more because you want to be picky, but so what? You get it back the way you want it.
Okay.
Why don't we tackle some of these other questions you had?
20-year versus 30-year mortgages. I know Justin likes the 15s. You like the 30, Brian. I have 20s on all my properties. But one thing I didn't like was that, so with a 20-year, it's obviously less cash flow, but one thing that I haven't heard many people mention is the ghost payments, if you will, the principal payments that you're paying down, but you're still getting taxed, income tax on that. And maybe that may not be a big deal for other people who have, a lot of properties, but someone like me, relatively new, who's just trying to build my portfolio, even though I have 4 20-year mortgages right now on my investment properties, this 5th one that I'm doing, I would like to try a 30-year because I would like to get that cash flow to acquire more properties. See more cash flow in my pocket, be taxed less. And I just think, it's kind of like the opportunity cost of capital that you're giving up with a 20-year mortgage.
Let me answer this first because I know Justin has a different opinion than I do. But I agree with you. I believe in maximizing your cash flow. And getting that 30-year fixed, to me, is the way I would go, just because I want to have more money in my pocket each month. Now, I've not, any property I've ever had with a 30-year fixed mortgage, I've either sold or refinanced at some point. So it ended up not even being a big deal. But it's good to have that cash flow, especially if you have other opportunities that you want to deploy it into. So that's my take, and Justin's over here getting ready to say the opposite.
Yeah, I guess I'm more of a long-term wealth builder. That is always my philosophy of I can sacrifice today so that in the future I have more wealth. I mean, that's really what I'm trying to do all the time. I pay cash for things. I tell everybody, if you're gonna do loans, do short-term loans. As short as you can make them and make it work. I just put it in my calculator quick. So on your property, $250,000 property value, you're gonna do a 70% refi. So you're putting 30% down, more or less. So you're gonna finance $175,000. Today's interest rate, I just plugged in 5.25. Okay. On a 30-year note, over the whole 30-year period, you're going to pay $172,000 and change in interest. Okay. And the payment would be $967, more or less, a month. Just payment on the $175,000 borrowed. If we change that to a 20-year note, your payment goes up to $1,180, and over the life of the note, you only pay $108,000 in interest. So you basically save $65,000 in interest. In my mind, you gained $65,000 in wealth by cutting that to a 10-year payment.
All right, so let's take that. So here's my argument there is, first of all, it's his tenants who are paying that. So that's your tenants paying that. That's $65,000 in wealth that you get over the 20-year period. That's $65,000. That's money. I'd be interested to know what, how much each year he's paying more on a 20 versus what he'd be paying on a 30, because whatever you're saving over that period of time, if you are able to redeploy enough capital and get a return on that, then you're growing your wealth even faster because of it.
So I ran some quick numbers.
Hold on, I got to rebut Brian a minute.
Okay.
Sorry. So it's less than $200 a month is what it amounts to. So you're talking $2,400 a year. Really?
$2,400. Okay.
$2,400 a year. If you take that $2,400 a year times 20 years, it'd be $48,000. Okay? Is total savings during that time period. But now I'm going to save $65,000 by paying in a 20-year period. So I'm already $17,000 ahead. And for the next 10 years, on top of that, I'm going to make the full $1,000 a month. So I'm going to make $12,000 a year for the next 10 years. So from a wealth standpoint, I saved $17,000 plus I'm going to get $12,000 for 10 years. So I'm ahead. Oops, I screwed that up on my calculator. So I got $17,000 because I paid early, more or less, and I paid the extra $200. So I came out ahead that way by paying interest. And then for 10 years, I'm going to save $12,000 a year. I'm $137,000 richer at the end of the day because I paid in a 20-year versus a 30-year. $137,000 may not sound like a ton of money, but you got to remember you're only borrowing $175,000. So that's more or less, 75% of that mortgage. You're going to be further off ahead if you're willing to make the sacrifice today. And I disagree that your tenants are paying the rent, the mortgage. Yeah. You are always paying the mortgage. If your tenant doesn't pay, you pay the mortgage. It is your mortgage. It is not theirs. You're making money off your tenants, but at the end of the day, you're on the hook for that mortgage. The bank's not going to foreclose on your tenants, Brian.
Right. So I'll disagree with Dave Ramsey over here for a sec.
So can I butt in for 1 second though? I ran some quick numbers before the show. I was interested in, so right, with a 20-year mortgage, you're going to have less cash flow. But at the end of 20 years, you're going to be paid off and have more cash flow.
Yep.
So I was curious to see over a 30-year period what the difference would be if I went with a 30-year versus 20-year in total cash flow and total interest saved.
And that's the number I just gave you. That was that $137,000 number. And that's using the same interest rate. Normally, if you do a 20-year mortgage versus a 30, your interest rate's going to be lower as well. So
but you're also
maybe closer to $150,000 if you're borrowing $175,000.
But are you also accounting for the cost of additional cash flow that 30-year mortgage would put out versus a 20-year?
Yep, it was $200 a month for 20 years, so it came up to $48,000. So that was the $48,000 is what it would cost you to do the 28. Now I'm saving $65,000 in total interest paid over the 30 year. Does that make sense? So I'm coming out $17,000 ahead by paying on the 20 year. Just in interest versus cost of the extra $200 a month. I'm coming out $17,000 ahead. Now, if I take it for the next 10 years, I'm gaining $120,000 out of the next 10 years because I no longer have that mortgage payment that was about $1,000 a month. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So now I'm essentially $137,000 ahead if I'm willing to sacrifice on a 20-year versus a 30-year. The other thing we didn't factor into this crazy conversation is a 20-year interest rate is going to be lower than a 30-year interest rate.
Yes,
usually
absolutely.
by 1/4 to 1/2%, probably. So you're going to save even more than that in the long haul. Now, again, this is a wealth building strategy, not a cash flow strategy. So I get both sides.
All right. So you make a compelling argument, but let me just make two arguments here.
Yeah.
One is Frank is building his wealth now. I mean, he's at an age where it's like he wants to buy more properties. Freeing up more cash flow now is more valuable to him than freeing up all that cash flow in 20 years. And in 20 years, if he's able to buy more properties because he's getting 30-year loans, there will be even more income from those, even if he is on a 30-year note.
I understand that point, but what we're really talking about when we break it down is it's $2,400 a year is the extra money he has in his pocket if he goes to a 30-year loan. At $2,400 a year, how many years does it take for him to save a down payment for a house? What are you buying? You're buying two $150,000 houses?
There's 3 families, fully rehabbed 3 families in my area right now are going between $250 all the way up to like $330.
All right, let's just say you're going to buy a $250,000 house and your bank's requiring a 25% down payment. So you would need $62,500 for that down payment. If we divide that by your $2,400 a month or a year that you're saving, it would take you 26 years to buy that house.
But he's got 5 different properties right now.
But we're analyzing it one to one.
30 years on all 5 of those properties, now he's a lot closer to having that down payment.
But my argument would be is you have essentially 6 years after that 20-year mortgage is paid off to get that same equivalent money. And in 6 years after it's paid off, you will have more than you would have if you saved for that full 26 years.
But you have to wait for the 20-year period.
Investment is all about waiting. It's about time. It's not a get-rich-quick thing. This is a long-term play. This is a wealth-building strategy.
Right, but it's a wealth-building strategy, too, to pick up as many of these cash-flowing properties, whether you have a 20 or 30-year mortgage. So isn't it better to pick up more if you on a 30-year mortgage than to pick up less on a 20-year mortgage?
I don't think you're going to pick up more on a 30 than you would on a 20. Like I said, it's $2,400 a month on that one. I think in the long term, you will own more properties by paying them off quicker.
Frank has 5 properties right now. If
Yes.
they were all on the 30-year, that would be an extra $12,000, $13,000 a year that he'd have to deploy into other things. Money which he's paying say 5% on. If he's able to turn that into other investments where he's getting that 20% return, then but even there, but he would be. That's the thing.
He wouldn't,
because Frank's goal is to buy more properties. He's not going. He's not taking this money and going on vacation. He's buying more properties. So he's putting that money to use and getting a higher return than the interest rate that he's putting on it.
And I understand all of that. I completely do. I get it.
I don't think
argue this back.
I don't think you understand.
The problem you never factor in is the risk involved and the things that do happen in life. You know? I mean, look where we're at today. We may be told we could only own one house in the future. Why do you want 30 of them on a 30-year mortgage? When you can only own one. No, I don't think we'll ever get to that point. But it's a philosophy. It's a strategy. I understand the infinite return and the goal of having that in some cases. In my mind, I've seen it time and time again where the guys that use minimal debt service and will reinvest as much as they physically can have done far superior to those that have rolled again and again and again and again, every penny back in. I know there's cases where it goes the other way too, but the guys that I know and the people that I really trust have done that. And when times are tough, they are flying high because they have cash they can invest, they can deploy into other assets, and they've really, really done well.
And I know plenty of people who are doing very well with 30-year fixed mortgages and enjoying that cash flow very, very much.
Borrowing 95% on the dollar and sending it down the road.
So Frank, what are you going to do? What does your gut tell you that you want to do?
Well, I already have 420 years. I think I want to maybe try the 30 and see what happens. But one thing I kind of wanted to point out too is at the beginning, right? At the beginning of the loan, you're paying more in interest.
Yes.
And with a 30-year loan, you're going to see more in interest, so you have more to write off at the end of the year. So that's another reason why the cash flow would be greater off a 30-year mortgage, because you can deduct the interest expense, as with the 20-year, you have more going to principal, more ghost payments that are going to principal that you're taxed on, but you're not realizing that cash flow now. So for a new investor, I think the tax savings kind of make sense at the beginning to go with the 30-year.
All right, let's cover this because I think it's a topic most people don't cover. Yes, interest is a write-off and it is an expense to a business. But I think most people get hung up on and think about it as a dollar per dollar exchange when they're doing their taxes. And it's not. I spent $1,000 in interest. I am not really saving $1,000 on taxes.
No, you're saving $1,000.
You're saving... Yeah, you're saving whatever percentage of income you're taxed on. So now if you're in a 30% tax bracket, you're saving, $300 of that $1,000 is what you're saving. So it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. And again, I think when you get into it long term, that interest that you're saving on or you think you're saving on doesn't mean a hill of beans at the end of the day in the long term scheme of things.
I did the numbers. I think I'm just off the four properties, off the 4 properties I have in service right now. I think I'm paying $20,000 per year to principal, which I don't see, but I'm taxed on.
But you will see it. You will see it because when you go to sell that property, you will see that gain. Today, it is income that you're getting taxed on, and I get that. But you will see it someday, whether it's when you sell the property, when your family sells the property, somebody's going to see that someday. It's not an expense that's realized today. It's that long-term thought process of you're paying down that principal, and when you do go to sell it or when that thing turns over, that's when you're going to realize that capital gain.
I do want to get to your other questions and answer them quickly.
Yeah, so just looking for your guys' thoughts on points. And the bank I'm going to probably go with to finance this two-family. Gave me a rough quote over the phone. 30-year, 5.25%, no points. 4.875 with 1.5 points, or a 20-year at 5%, no points, or 4.5% with 1.5 points.
Will you explain to everybody how much a point is? Do you know that?
Yeah, it's a percent, 1.5% of the total loan amount.
Yes. So in your case, you're going to borrow $250,000, or no, you're going to borrow 185.
185. Yeah.
185.
Yeah.
So the cost of a point on 185 would be $1,800.
Mm-hmm.
So on 1.5% would be $2,700. $2,775 would be the cost of that point. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in my mind, when you're talking about points, it really comes down to how long are you going to own it? Because it's a calculation in my mind. There's a point at which the two lines cross, whether you bought points or you didn't. If you buy that point, you're going to save X amount in interest every month versus how much you paid for that point. So in your case, it provides, you save $50 a month, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So based on that 2,775 number you came up with, or we calculated out, if you saved $50 a month, it would take you 55.5 months to get your money back. So if you're going to own it for more than, what is that? Five years? Yeah, 4 years. Buy the points. If it's going to be a quick turn, don't buy the points. It is strictly a calculation in my book on whether it's a good investment or not. If you're going to own it forever, you're going to own the thing till you pay off that 20 or 30-year mortgage, you're far ahead by paying that couple $1,000 up front.
Okay. And I mean, the goal is, to go with the 20, try to, keep it as long as you can. And, it would make sense, obviously. I guess I think it would make sense in either case because I do, well, I say I plan to keep it forever, but as we know, who knows what will end up happening down the road.
Yeah.
When you buy it, you always say, I'm going to keep it forever, and then you never know what's going to happen after that.
Yeah. But if that's your intent at this point in time, it makes sense to buy it down.
Yeah.
I think so.
And
okay.
We're only talking about 4 or 5 years. I mean, worst case scenario, somebody comes along and wants to pay you $1 million for it. Are you going to care about the $2,000 you spent on buying a point?
Yeah. Good point.
You don't care. So as long as you're going to hold it for any period of time, definitely buy it. You want to get into the next one?
When you see the market, and I know, Brian, I know you're more into commercial, but as far as residential and the smaller 3 families, 2 families, and the prices are just skyrocketing in my area. I mean, I'm seeing 3 families around, $300,000. It just doesn't make sense to buy anything. And I'm gonna look into alternative ways and paths to try to find better deals, such as tax auctions. I'm gonna go to one of those. I have not been to one of those yet. I'm gonna check out some of those. See, just definitely do my research. I'm not gonna jump into that one for sure before I try to buy a house through a tax auction or a sheriff's sale. But when there are, there's just like no, deals in sight. I guess the question was kind of just, how long did you guys go? If the prices weren't right, just sitting on your real estate and just trying to get your bankroll up, because for me, I just want to buy. And it's at some point I got to hold myself back and say, look, I can't. Like this last property I bought, I went an entire year without purchasing another property. And it was difficult to not buy anything because I felt like I just wasn't growing. So I just am curious to see what you guys kind of do if prices aren't right. And I know, Brian, you're more with the commercial side, so
yeah, but it's very similar. I mean, I look at the opportunities that are out there and in the multifamily and apartments, and I only buy in my neighborhood. I don't want to really buy multifamily or apartments out of state, just because I like to be able to drive by my properties and see them all and be only 20 minutes from them. I haven't bought anything since 2015.
Okay.
So that's my answer, is I'm just not buying. I'm sitting on the fence because I know if I were to pay what the sellers are asking, I would not be able to get the returns that I need to get. And so I've kind of taken a step back from that and looked at other asset classes and opportunities there. But that's me. What are you doing, Justin?
I'm in a similar process where my buying has slowed down dramatically over the last few years. And I think your market cycle is a little off compared to ours. Ours has been hot for, I'd say, several years at this point in time, where it's hard.
5 years.
Yeah, I would say so too. So my buying has really slowed down. I am able to still pick up a few things here and there, but it's not one a month or two a month or anything crazy anymore. It's really slowed. I haven't bought anything this year yet, and it's April, end of May, or beginning of May. I don't know when this is going to air, but I don't know if I will buy anything this year, just because, like you say, the cash flow on some of this stuff doesn't make sense. The amount that you got to buy a dump for these days and what you got to put into it just keeps going up and up and up. And I can't make the numbers work where I feel like it is worth my time to buy this, put all this energy and effort into it. So I am holding tight more than, I should be. I've adjusted numbers up definitely because of the market, but at the end of the day, it's still got to make sense. If it doesn't make sense, I think you can get yourself into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and let me just add that, I was taught always buy for cash flow, not for appreciation. And since you're buying for yourself and you don't have investors to take into consideration, maybe you could still find some opportunities if you lowered your expectations when it came to the cash flow or the return on investment. I mean, you've bought some where you're looking at a 30% return on investment. Would you accept a 15% return on investment?
No.
But yeah, so if that's the case, then I guess you're sitting on the fence just like us.
Brian, you mentioned other asset classes you're looking into. I'm curious as if you could tell me what that is, just out of curiosity.
So
is that top secret?
No, I've talked about this before, maybe not on my podcast, but other podcasts. I've been getting involved in self-storage. And,
that's right.
And non-performing notes. So I've found strategic partners in those areas that I'm working with to invest in those areas. And I'll go back to investing in multifamily and apartments when the cycle changes and I start seeing opportunities again.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay if you can find a cash flowing property that makes sense. I think you can buy them today. The difference is it's got to be a safe real estate today is either a real short-term play in my mind, so it's less than 6 months, you're going to turn and burn the thing and it's out of your hair, or it's a 10-year play, of I'm going to own it for at least 10 years, so I don't care if the market goes down and we ride the wave back up again. It's the stuff that's in between. It's the guys that say, well, I want to hold it for 3 to 6 years. Well, that really scares me at this point because I don't know where that market's going to be during that time period. So I think if you're in it for the long haul, you're fine. And I think if you're in it for the short term, you can see it coming and you can get out fast enough from underneath it. But I think we will see a correction at some point. It's just a matter of when and where, and it may be 20 years before we see that correction again. You just don't know.
And your guys' market is still continuing to go up over there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've been at a 10% plus appreciation rate year after year in Grand Rapids for, I don't know, I'd say about 5 or 6 years now. I mean, and it's been as high as like 15, 18, depending on neighborhoods or better. So, I mean, you think about that for a 5-year period, houses have jumped on a $100,000 house. It's now a $175,000 house, so where you can make money buying them at 100, at 180, you can't hardly make it work. So we know all about that game.
Yeah. So Frank, I'm gonna wrap this up. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, it was great talking to you guys. I appreciate it and letting me on the show. I had a good time.
Us too, and it's great taking your questions. I think you've asked some very sophisticated questions, and to me, they indicate that you're going to be very successful just because you're thinking along these lines and listening to podcasts and taking advice from me and Justin. I may not agree with everything Justin says, but I do appreciate him and his experience, and maybe I'll admit that he's smarter than me in some cases.
I think it's good advice for everybody. Me and Brian definitely don't see eye to eye on some of our strategy things, but I love listening to his opinion and his theory and his philosophy on it, because it only helps strengthen me and my views on who's right. Yeah, no, but definitely when you're out there talking to people, listen to all sides. It's not a one side is the correct answer. It's really not. I may think I'm right, but I know I'm not. Brian does really well for himself, so I know he's on to the right track too. And there's others like him, unfortunately. But no, just listen to the other side. Get as much info as you can. I think it's the best way to learn possible is just talk to people and learn from them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And another thing is, I did, I had a good buddy of mine when I started out with real estate after I bought my first couple properties. He, little did I know that he was, he owns like 30 or 40 commercial properties, and he, if I got ran into a jam with rehabbing a house or had a question, I'd call him because I had someone to call when I really got stuck. And it's mentors and just listening to people. It's just great things for people that are just starting out.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, first of all, do you want them to? And if so, how would they do that?
Yeah, you can reach me. You can email me at frank@marattainvestments.com. That's Maratta is Maratta investments with an S.com. And absolutely, if you just want to have a conversation, or even if I could help with my couple of years of experience that I had, any questions, or you just want to have a conversation about real estate, more than feel more than welcome to shoot me an email, and I look forward to talking with you.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.